Welcome to CFB Cauldron Live. I'm Bubba welcoming you. Thank you so much for joining us for our first ever live show tonight. I'm so excited for football this season. I just want to get a quick episode in tonight before the Week 1 game started tomorrow night. Has some great matchups tomorrow night. First backyard brawl in 11 years. I'm sure that's going to be fantastic. I love when conferences have games to begin the season, or conference games to begin the season, and that's what we have tomorrow night when Penn State travels to West Lafayette to take on Purdue. So before all of these games started tomorrow night, I just want to get a quick episode in. And first thing I want to do tonight actually is preview my top 3 matchups I'm most looking forward to watching in Week 1. So let's get right into it actually. The matchup I'm looking forward to most, Week 1 this year, is Florida against Utah. So the Utes travel cross country, come all the way to the swamp to take on the Florida team under their first game as the in their first game of the Billy Napier regime. So what I'm looking forward to in this game is 2 things from the Florida side. One, I want to see Anthony Richardson and see his growth as a quarterback this past offseason. Everyone knows that watches Florida football, or if you just are a college football fan in general, you probably know about Anthony Richardson. You know about his skill set, you know how talented he is. He has a rocket arm. He hurdles people, he runs over defenders. Anthony Richardson's a superstar athlete, but can he take that next step as a quarterback and try to beat teams with his arm from the pocket? He didn't show that last year in limited action, but I think we're going to see a different Anthony Richardson this year, because I don't know if Billy Napier and his staff want to run Anthony Richardson too much just because they don't have a lot of depth at the quarterback position. So I think we're going to see a different Anthony Richardson than we saw last year. We're not going to see the running back that's going to run downhill and try to carry the ball 15, 20 times a game. We're going to see a more developed pocket passer, I think. And I think the Florida offensive line's good. The Florida offensive line was solid last year. They're a great running blocking unit. They added Osiris Torrance from Louisiana. He was one of the top interior offensive linemen in the transfer portal. So this Florida offensive line that was already solid got bolstered even more. So I think Coach Billy Napier and that Florida offensive staff is going to keep Anthony Richardson in the pocket. My second question with this Florida offense is the receiver position. They're good at running back. They have Montrell Johnson transfer over from Louisiana. You have Naquan Wright. You have Trevor Etienne, who's going to be a true freshman, younger brother of Jacksonville Jaguars running back Travis Etienne. I think Florida's fine at running back. I think Florida's fine at the top end at quarterback. If Anthony Richardson goes out, then a few questions arise, but Anthony Richardson will be fine at quarterback. Offensive line's going to be solid, I think. Wide receiver is a big position of question. You lose in the past few years, you've lost Trayvon Grimes. You've lost Kyle Pitts. You've lost Kadarius Toney. You lost Jacob Copeland to the portal. You lost Keymore Gamble to UCF this past offseason. He also entered the portal. So I think you're going to need a few guys that are on the roster now to step up. The guy I think that has the best potential to step up, or should step up, is Justin Shorter. Justin Shorter was a top 10 recruit coming out of high school. I believe he's in the class of 2019. He has all the talent in the world. If you build a wide receiver in a lab, Justin Shorter would be the result. But Justin Shorter just hasn't had the production, mostly because he's played behind guys like Kadarius Toney, Kyle Pitts, Trayvon Grimes, you name it. But now this is Justin Shorter's position room. It's his turn to take that next step and become that number 1 receiver that Florida needs, and more importantly, that Anthony Richardson needs. I think another guy that can step up is Ricky Pearsall. He's a transfer from Arizona State, and then also Creed Whitmore, who was on the team last year, solid slot receiver. I think those are the 3 guys that you're looking forward to with Florida when it comes to their wide receiver room, but all of them need to take a step up if this Florida offense is going to click. As far as the Florida defensive side of the football, defensive backfield is very good. I think Florida sneakily has one of the better defensive backfields in the country. Even after losing Kaiir Elam, I still think the defensive backfield is going to be just fine. Jason Marshall is one of the better corners in college football. I think he's a dark horse candidate to make a few different All-American lists this year. I think the front seven's a bigger question when it comes to the Florida defense. You have Brennan Cox back for what feels like is his 1,000,000th year of college football. You have Ventrell Miller, who's come back from injury. He'll help out with the pass rush. You have Gervin Dexter, who's an NFL type of talent in the middle. I think around those 3 guys, there's a lot of youth, though. And then when you play a team like Utah, I mean, we talk about the Utah offensive line. They're a big physical group of guys. They're returning a lot along the offense. They have a big physical offensive line. They have a big physical running back in Tavian Thomas. Even Cam Rising's not afraid to put his shoulder down and run downhill. So I think when it comes to the Florida-Utah matchup, I really think the Florida defensive front 7 in the Utah offensive line and running backs and backfield in general. It's going to be one of those matchups I'm looking for. Another one I'm looking at is the Utah wide receiver position, along with Florida, like I was looking at the Florida wide receiver position. Florida has question marks, so does Utah. Utah has a few guys I think could step up, and Brayton Cumby was a heck of a return man and a great slot receiver. He's gone. He's off to the NFL. I think Devon Vele and Mekhi Cope are going to be your guys on the outside that you're going to look to fill this role that Utah needs as far as outside receivers. As far as slot guys, I think the number one option is going to be their leading receiver from a year ago, tight end Brett Kuth. He's a really, really good tight end. You don't hear a lot about Utah on a national stage just because it's a Pac-12 team. You're not going to hear a lot about a Pac-12 team, especially if you live on the East Coast. This Utah offense is really good, though they may be experienced on the outside as far as the wide receiver position goes. I think they'll be fine. They'll make up for it. And a name to watch for this Utah team for this upcoming year, true freshman running back Jaden Glover. True freshman out of high school, went to Lakeland in Florida, 3-star guy. I watched the Utah spring game, and he was making plays all over the field. Look for Jaden Glover to be a change of pace guy to Tavian Thomas. Tavian Thomas, big bruising back. I don't know what a great comparison for Tavian Thomas is. Maybe like a Brandon Jacobs from the New York Giants. So kind of expect that 1-2 thunder and lightning punch from Tavian Thomas and Jaden Glover in that Utah backfield. The next game that I'm looking forward to this week 1 is going to be Cincinnati traveling to Fayetteville to take on the Hogs, the Razorbacks. So this is a classic matchup of experience versus inexperience. This Cincinnati team lost 9 players to the NFL, which is very rare for a group of 5 team. Usually we see teams like Alabama, Ohio State, your Georgias. Georgia lost even more than Cincinnati. But those are the kind of teams that have that kind of top-end talent where they can lose 9 guys to the NFL and then be fine the next season. I think we'll see that with Georgia this year. I think Georgia lost 5 defenders in the first round, and this Georgia defense, maybe not as good as last year's, but this Georgia defense will be able to reload. Cincinnati doesn't have that luxury. Cincinnati doesn't recruit at a top 10 level. So I'm not sure if the Bearcats are quite as good as some people think they are, not because there isn't talent on the roster, but a lot of that talent they have is very inexperienced. You lose guys like Kobe Bryant, you lose guys like Sauce Gardner, Myji Sanders, Desmond Ritter, Jerome Ford. I mean, there's a lot of guys that Cincinnati lost. Speaking of Desmond Ritter, who's been the starter the entire time that Luke Fickell has been at Cincinnati, is now gone. He's playing for the Falcons. Cincinnati actually has a quarterback battle, and Luke Fickell came out and said he's not going to tell us who the starter is before week 1. We're just going to watch the game at 3:30. We're going to figure out who the starter is. 2 guys that seem to be competing for the spot are Evan Prater, who was Desmond Ritter's backup last year, top 200 quarterback coming out, top 200 player coming out of high school, highly rated quarterback, dual threat guy. Needs to add a little bit of weight to his frame when he was coming out of high school. I think he probably did that. I've kind of been under the impression that Evan Prater is going to start for the Bearcats week 1, but some people think Ben Bryant, Eastern Michigan transfer, he started all 13 games last year for Eastern Michigan, has that experience that you probably want when you're heading into an SEC environment. So I'm excited to see who Cincinnati trots out there week 1. But I think another thing is Trey Scott, the wide receiver, is really got to help out whoever the quarterback is. As far as Arkansas goes, they're the complete opposite of Cincinnati as far as experience. You return KJ Jefferson, who led the team in rushing and passing last year. You return an experienced offensive line. You have Raheem Sanders, the 3rd leading rusher from last year. On defense, you bring back Bumper Poole, who's an absolute tackling machine, as an awesome name. Bumper should be a more popular name. Awesome name, tackling machine. You bring back Jalen Catalon, who missed the second half. He's on the screen now. Missed the second half of last season with a shoulder injury. Versatile player, one of my favorite players to watch in all of college football. I actually wrote a player breakdown of him on the site, so if you want to go check that out, it's just going to be cfbcauldron.com and go to player breakdown. Read about Jalen Catalon, because Jalen Catalon, you'll see he's 5'11", 210 pounds, but the guy's an absolute missile coming downhill, and he'll even line up at defensive end or outside linebacker sometime. You return him after injury. You add a lot of guys. You had Dwight McGlotherin from LSU this offseason in the transfer portal. Maybe the best edge rusher in the transfer portal was Drew Sanders from Alabama. It's a 5-star kid coming out of high school. Unfortunately, Alabama already has Dallas Turner and Will Anderson on the edges. So Drew Sanders was in need of a home, and he decided to go to Arkansas. I'm excited because the Arkansas pass rush wasn't elite last year. They were bottom half of the SEC in terms of sacks. I think guys like Landon Jackson, guys like Drew Sanders can really help that Arkansas unit. So ultimately, I think the biggest question and what I'm looking forward to most this week is how does the Cincinnati inexperience respond in a hostile environment? Arkansas's fans are going to be excited. They came off a big 9-4 season, won the Outback Bowl against Penn State. Is Cincinnati going to be able to handle this pressure that this Arkansas team and fan base are going to have on them? So my third most anticipated matchup for Week 1 is going to be Florida State against LSU in New Orleans. Apparently, this is a neutral site game. Don't know who agreed to that, especially since it's 45 minutes from LSU's campus. But my biggest question in this game, as far as the LSU and Florida State game, I want to see if Florida State's going to be able to run the ball. Florida State's offense, at least under Mike Norvell since he's been there, has not been explosive as far as it comes to throwing the football. They have not had a vertical passing game. So Florida State's relied on running the ball. And typically, like last year, Florida State started 0-4, and they started to pick up. Jayshon Corbin had a big second half of the year last year. Florida State was able to run the ball and move the ball more effectively. So I think that Florida State, in order to move the ball offensively, is going to have to run the ball. Now, the strength of this LSU defense is the front seven. This LSU defense front seven has apparently had a fantastic camp as well. So I don't know if Florida State's going to be able to move the ball on this LSU defensive front seven. If they can, I think that spells big trouble for Mike Norvell in this Noles offense. Because if Florida State can't run the ball, then you're putting the whole offensive game plan on Jordan Travis and his right arm, which I don't think sets Florida State up for success. Flip side of the football, LSU, another team with a quarterback battle. You have Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier battling it out for the QB1 position. It seems like it's going to be Daniels. A few people think it may be Nussmeier, but I think Daniels, he transferred over from Arizona State this past offseason. He brings 3 years of starting experience. He has production in the Pac-12 as a starter at a big university. I also think he fits the offense a little bit better. LSU hired Cincinnati offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock this past offseason. I think Jaden Daniels plays a similar style to Desmond Ridder also. So I think that kind of sets up for a seamless transition into the new Mike Denbrock offense that Brian Kelly brought over from Cincinnati. So that's that side of the football. For the Florida State defense, I'm looking at the edge rushers. You bring in Jared Verse from Albany. Jared Verse was one of the top defenders in the entire transfer portal. I remember there's a play last year. Albany was playing Syracuse. Sean Tucker, Syracuse running back, 4'3", 4'4" guy, sprinting down the field. Jared Verse almost caught him from behind as a 250-pound defensive end. So Jared Verse flashed in the game against Duquesne. Obviously, LSU isn't Duquesne, but are Jared Verse and Florida State other pass rushers able to throw this LSU offense off a track? If LSU offense gets off track, they're stuck in third and longs. They're forced to throw the ball downfield. I don't think that's where LSU wants to be, especially not under a new quarterback. So I think that'll be interesting to see how good of a job does Florida State do in throwing this LSU offense off track. I think a key part of that is going to be Derek McClendon and Jared Verse, Florida State's two edge rushers. Next thing I want to talk about today, so that concludes the Week 1 matchups I'm looking forward to. Next thing I want to do is my futures bets for this past offseason. So I had 5 futures bets this offseason. I put money on all of these, so I'm just not throwing out random picks and leaving you to the sharks. If you lose money, I lose money as well. So there's that at least. So 5 plays. I talked about Arkansas a few minutes ago. I love the Arkansas over 7.5. Yes, Arkansas plays a gauntlet of a schedule. They're in the SEC West. Every team in the SEC West is going to play a gauntlet of a schedule. I think Arkansas is probably biggest. This may sound weird because they're playing the likes of A&M. They're playing Alabama. I think Arkansas's biggest game of the season are these first 2 games. I think if they can beat Cincinnati at home, and they have a tough matchup week 2 at home as well against South Carolina. I think if Arkansas can win those 2 games, they are well on their way to winning at least 8 games. I don't see them playing below 500 in conference play. Even though the conference is brutal, I don't see it. I think KJ Jefferson's too efficient of a passer. I think Raheem Sanders is a really good running back. As far as the wide receiver position goes, I don't think I talked about this earlier. You lose Traylon Burks, but you add Jaden Hazelwood, and you add Matt Landers from Toledo. You also added multiple other players in the transfer portal this offseason for the wide receiver position. So it's obviously going to be receiver by committee. They're not going to have a Traylon Burks this year. They're going to have multiple guys to try to make up for the production that Burks left this past offseason. Second bet is going to be Virginia under 7.5 wins. So Virginia is a weird team. Virginia went 6-6 last year. They dropped their last few games of the season. Virginia also, head coach Bronco Mendenhall retired this past offseason. So it's going to be interesting to see what Tony Elliott comes over from Clemson, coach under Dabo Swinney for a while. It's going to be interesting to see how he adapts this Virginia offense. Because last year the Virginia offense only threw the football. Virginia was second in overall passing. They barely ran the football at all. So it's going to be interesting to see if Tony Elliott wants more of a balanced attack for the Virginia offense. The good thing is you return quarterback who was second in the country in passing yards last year, Brennan Armstrong. You also return his top 3 targets in Billy Kemp, Dontavion Wicks, and Keontae Thompson. All 3 Brennan Armstrong's top receivers are back. So you may be wondering why I'm betting the Virginia under. The reason I'm betting the Virginia under is the defense lost their 2 best players in Joey Blunt and Noah Taylor, and Virginia lost all 5 offensive linemen from last year. All 5 starters are gone. 1 graduated, 4 hit the transfer portal. You may have heard the saying, the portal giveth and the portal taketh away, or take away. The portal took away a lot from the Who's, and they didn't give a whole lot back. They added a few edge rushers to help the defense, but when you lose all 5 offensive linemen, Brennan Armstrong's going to be running for his life a lot back. If everything goes according to plan, my plan, I guess, Brennan Armstrong's going to be running for his life a lot back there. I feel bad because the Virginia offense was fun to watch last year. They threw the ball around. I think it's going to be hard to win 8 games when you're replacing all 5 starting offensive linemen from the week before, or from the year before. Excuse me. Next bet is going to be Utah. Utah over 9 wins. That's going to be minus 165 bet. I think the floor of this Utah team is 9 wins. I really like this Utah team's experience at the head coaching position, experience at the quarterback position. Cam Rising's coming back for a second year. I know he didn't start last year, but as soon as he got plugged into this offense last year, the Utah offense really started to shine. You bring back Tavian Thomas, a lot of experience on defense. You do lose your top 2 linebackers in Sewell and Lloyd, but you pick up Mohamed Diabate from Florida, who's seen a lot of action. I think he'll slide into that role pretty nicely. As far as the schedule goes, there's 3 games that you circle on the Utah schedule. It's week 1 at Florida. They play USC a little later in October, and then they make a trip to Eugene in November. Those are the 3 games that you're looking at. Even if Utah drops all 3 of those games, you still push the bet. That's worst case scenario, is you push the bet in my mind. So I really like Utah even though the odds are juiced for the over, I still like Utah to go over 9 wins. The next team is going to be Auburn. So Auburn was an absolute firestorm this past offseason. There was rumors of Brian Harsin getting fired. There was a coup by the boosters trying to get him out. There was a lot going on at Auburn. And I think what got overlooked is Auburn lost 5 starters on each side of the football. They lost a lot of production on defense this past offseason. They lost their top 2 receivers, including Kobe Hudson, who transferred to UCF. They lost their starting quarterback. So a few days ago, Brian Harsin named TJ Finley the starting quarterback for Auburn. I hope TJ Finley has a great season, but I just don't see it with the schedule that Auburn plays. Auburn plays in the SEC West. It's going to be an absolute gauntlet of a schedule. TJ Finley only completed 54% of his passes last season when he came in for Bo Nix. Bo Nix transferred over to Oregon. TJ Finley's the guy Auburn's rolling with, and I can't have Auburn winning at least 7 games if the quarterback plays subpar compared to the rest of the division. SEC West is filled with fantastic quarterbacks. You have Bryce Young, you have KJ Jefferson, you have Will Rogers, you have Jackson Dart, Luke Altmaier, whoever starts for Ole Miss. I think they're probably in a better position than Auburn is. So just because of the lack of offensive weapons and the fact that I'm not a big TJ Finley believer, I'm going to take Auburn on the under. And if Auburn hits the under, Brian Harsin probably loses his job as well. So obviously, you don't want Brian Harsin to get fired. You don't want anyone to get fired. But I just think it's going to be tough for this Auburn offense to generate a lot. They're replacing multiple key. Roger McCreary left. Smoke Monday left. They're going to be replacing a decent amount of pieces in that back end of the defense as well, which leaves them vulnerable in certain positions. The last futures bet I wanted to take was Illinois over 4.5 wins. This is the only team on this list that has already played. So they got a big victory against Wyoming, so that's always great. Bet's going to be minus 145. They looked really good week 0. The offense looked better than it did last year. Granted, it's Wyoming, so I mean we're not going to overreact. We're not going to act like they played Alabama. Offense looked much better than they did last year. I think they only averaged 21 points per game last season on offense. So going out and scoring almost 30 week 1 is always a good sign. They bring in transfer quarterback Tommy DeVito from Syracuse. You have Isaiah Williams, who I think is one of the most dynamic playmakers in the Big Ten. Really underrated wide receiver. Chase Brown is a 1,000-yard back they're returning. And then this Illinois defense in their first season under Brett Bielema only allowed less than 22 points per game, which is very impressive. I think the defense builds on that. They have some great pieces back there still. They lost Kirby Joseph, who got drafted in the NFL. But I still think the Illinois defense is probably going to be a notch better than they were last year. So I'm excited to watch this Illinois defense. I think 4.5 wins is really good. I've been on record. I wrote this on the site. I said I think that Illinois is winning 6 games this year. So I really like the over with 4.5. The last thing I want to talk about today are my week 1 plays. Once again, I put money on all of these. So if you want to bet these and you lose money, just remember I lose money as well. I'm a college student, so I really need a few of these to hit as well. First play of the week, this is in order of when the games start. Friday night, we have Illinois at Indiana. Illinois is a 3-point underdog. The odds on that are going to be minus 115. Really shocked to see that Illinois was a dog in this game. Indiana went 2-10 last year. They lose quarterback Michael Penix Jr. transferred to Washington. He got dinged up early in the season. I think it's going to be interesting to see who Indiana trots out there. It's either going to be Jack Tuttle or Connor Blazelak. Connor Blazelak transferred over from Missouri from this past offseason. I still think Indiana's missing multiple pieces on both sides of the football, where I think Illinois is a much more sound team, and Illinois also got a tune-up game in Wyoming. So I like the Illini here. I also would not hate to play them on the money line. I made this bet at +3, and it's moved to +1.5 last time I checked. It may be even closer to pick 'em now. So that's usually how you know your bet's pretty good when it moves. It moves that way as well. Next game I want to talk about is Cincinnati, Arkansas. I like the Hogs -6.5 here. That's going to be -110 as well. Cincinnati, like I mentioned, I talked about this game a lot earlier. A lot of inexperience on both sides of the football. You're going to be breaking in key positions. You're going to be breaking in cornerbacks. You're breaking quarterbacks. It's not a good combination typically to be starting a new quarterback on the road in an SEC game. I like the Hogs. They bring a lot of experience. I think they'll be able to run the football as well. Alabama, against a much better Cincinnati defense, was able to run the football at will last year. This Arkansas team led the SEC in rushing last year, so I think Arkansas will be able to run the football down the field. I like the Hogs -6.5 here. One of the most underrated games of the week, in my opinion, Houston at UTSA. UTSA won Conference USA last year, and Houston has aspirations to win the American this year. So I was kind of shocked to see that this game isn't getting more national attention, but I like the over here. UTSA returns quarterback Frank Harris. They also return his top 3 targets. They lose Sincere McCormick to the NFL, but they add Traylon Smith from Arkansas, who's a really good back. Arkansas' second leading rusher last season behind KJ Jefferson. So, and on the other side of football, Houston has a really good quarterback in Clayton Tune. Dana Holgorsen offenses are always going to be rocking and rolling. I like the over here at 62. I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair out in San Antonio. Fourth game I wanted to get to, Utah at Florida -3. That's an even odds bet. With Florida, I want to pick Florida in this game. The inexperience at certain positions is Billy Napier's first game as a head coach. I think I just had to go with experience in this case. I know Utah's never seen an environment like the Swamp, but I still think I like the Utes here, especially in the second half. They may be a little shell-shocked at first, but I think they settle down. I think the big key for Utah here is being able to run the football. If Utah can run the football, that sets up the rest of their offense. I think that's the case for most offenses, but especially a team like Utah that really relies on the run. I think they'll probably, maybe not first, but I think they wear down that Florida defense by the end of the game and start kind of laying it on them a little bit. My fifth bet is going to be LSU versus Florida State. That's LSU's 3-point favorite. That's a -110 bet. Ultimately, I don't trust this Florida State offense quite yet. I mean, I'm not there yet. I wish I could be, but Jordan Travis as a passer in the pocket is going to have to prove it to me. I'm going to have to see it on the screen. Florida State, they didn't struggle against Duquesne to throw the ball, but that would have been great if Jordan Travis went out there and threw almost 300 yards in the first half against Duquesne. They didn't do that. They ran the ball at will against Duquesne, which shows me, I don't know if that means that they just didn't want to open up the playbook, or if they just don't trust Jordan Travis as a passer yet. So I think I'm going to take LSU here with the points. It's also a pseudo home game for LSU. It's going to be in New Orleans. Once again, don't know who agreed to play a neutral site an hour away from LSU. Same thing with Georgia and Oregon. We're being completely honest. Besides Texas and Oklahoma and Florida, Georgia, abolish all neutral site games. They should all be played on campus. Last bet of the week is going to be Monday night, Labor Day. I like the under with Clemson at Georgia Tech. The under is going to be 51. That's a -110 bet as well. This Clemson offense, once again, it's in a prove-it state for me. I don't know how much better this Clemson offense got over the offseason. They were one of the worst in the conference last year, and they also lost their offense coordinator. Their offense coordinator is off to Virginia, head coach now. So with DJ Uiagalelei is going to be the starter week 1. Wouldn't be too surprised if we saw true freshman Cade Klubnik at some point, but DJ starting the game. I think this Clemson offense really struggles, at least at the beginning of the season. I think it's more signs of what we see next year. And Clemson, like I said, Clemson's going to have to prove it to me before I can bet an over on them. And then Georgia Tech offense, Don't know who they're going to try out there for quarterback. It will most likely be Jeff Sims. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he does struggle, if we don't see a little bit of Zach Gibson. Zach Gibson, the Akron transfer. I was pretty high on him. He looked better than Sims did in the Georgia Tech spring game. So if Sims struggles early on, expect to see Zach Gibson. Same thing on the Clemson side. If DJ struggles early on, we may see Cade Klubnik. Even though Dabo was pressing hard for DJ this offseason, don't be surprised if we see Cade Klubnik at some point if both offenses are struggling. So that's all for our first live show. If you have any ideas or suggestions or what you want us to do, a certain segment, you want us to talk about a certain team, I'd be more than willing to. You can do that by following us on social media. That's going to be at CFB Cauldron on Twitter and Instagram. DM me. Just reply to my latest tweet. Or you can email me if you don't want to put it out in public. You can email me. That's going to be cfbcauldron@gmail.com. Thank you so much for everyone tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed. Once again, let me know if you want me to add anything. Talk about any certain teams in the following weeks. I'm going to try to do this every Wednesday, 8 or 9 o'clock. Get off work usually around 8, so that's why it was 9 o'clock today. But I can try to move it up earlier if that works better for anyone's schedule. Okay.